One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed.
Our streets, our streets, our streets, our streets.
I have a dream.
Good evening. I'm Anne-MarieJohnson from the Mankind Project, and welcome to the premiere episode of Tears, the event against racism and stereotyping. For the next 40 minutes, a wonderful group of diverse artists will share their thoughts and reflection on race, racism, bigotry, and intolerance. These are challenging times, illnesses of our mind and of our body. Hundreds of thousands of souls lost to a pandemic, millions of lives upended due to an unstable economy, unchecked discrimination and systemic racism, and useless tone-deaf political rhetoric coming from those we've entrusted the care of our nation. But all is not lost. Today is August 28th, the 57th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King's words are as relevant today as they were over 50 years ago. The Mankind Project welcomes Vanessa Bell Calloway, Clancy Brown, and Amy Hill as they start off the premiere episode of Tears, the event against racism and stereotyping.
Well, if I had to convince somebody not to be racist, I would just say you gotta learn about other people. You got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You know, in order not to be racist, you have to have empathy and sympathy. You've got to really be able to just to look at somebody and see what their day-to-day life is like. When I did the premiere for Harriet at the Washington National African American Museum, we did a big premiere, and it was a gala and everything there. It was this past November, and it was wonderful. And that morning, my husband and I had a tour because we were like the only people left in America who had never seen it. So, and it was wonderful. But the docent that took us on the tour shared with us that she argues quite regularly with some white people when she's touring them, because they'll tell her parts of our history. They'll say, oh, that never happened. And she's like, no, this did happen. And I can't remember, forgive me, exactly the example she gave me of what they were denouncing. She said, but several times and through these tours, people would tell her, oh, that never happened. That's made up, that's fictional. And she's like, no, it's not. Now people are putting themselves, that's why we're having this conversation, which is great. And these are difficult conversations we have to have. Now everybody's putting themselves in the place of African Americans, Black people in this country, and where we've been all this time. Hispanic people, brown people, where we've been all this time. And it's okay. I get your white privilege. Like I said before, I get that you didn't decide what body to be born into, but how are you using your white privilege now? It's one thing to get out and, put on your social media, Black Lives Matter and march, but what are you doing on a regular basis? Yeah, things have changed. You can't say they have not, but have they changed enough, I think is the question. Has it equaled out? I think those are the questions, and the answer is no.
Black males have the lowest life expectancy of any group in the United States. Their unemployment rate is far more than twice that of white males. Even Black men with college degrees are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than their white counterparts. About 1 in 4 Black men between the ages of 20 and 29 is behind bars. Blacks receive longer prison sentences than whites who have committed the same crimes. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for young Black males since 1960. Suicide rates for young Black males have nearly tripled and doubled for Black females. While suicide among whites increases with age, it is a peculiarly youthful phenomenon among Blacks. Many Black males die prematurely from 12 major preventable diseases. Nearly 1/3 of all Black families in America live below the poverty line. Half of all Black children are born in poverty and will spend all their youth growing up in poor families. Now that's from a 1991 report of the 21st Century Commission on African American Males. And that was 30 years ago. 30 years ago. racial strife is something that we've struggled with for thousands and thousands of years. And there's no legislation that can be passed. There's no fix that can be made. The fix has to be done from within our own hearts. It's a symptom of the issue. I don't think anybody has hatred in their hearts, but when one class of people is consistently oppressed and suffers economic inequality, then it's bound to rear its head. We must realize that we're never going to fix it by some kind of protest or some kind of legislation or achieving some kind of goal. Those are all worth striving for. But we have to fix it somewhere deep in our hearts so that when you look across the street at someone, there is no fear, there's no feeling of superiority or inferiority. You just see another human being.
Please check yourself. Check in on yourself. If you feel like the victim, make sure you don't become the problem. If you feel angry because you are a victim of rage and hatred and historical, institutional injustice, you have every right. If you feel like you're an ally, check yourself. I was born in a time multiracial kids were not cool. My birth certificate lists my dad as white, my mom as yellow. Because I couldn't be immediately scanned as a specific racial group, and because we were poor, I never really knew why people disliked me without knowing me. A teacher in 4th grade would shudder when I got near her. Her hate was so powerful. When I walked into a nice department store, every clerk would follow me with angry glares. It was every day, small moments, threaded together to make me feel less than. I grew up feeling other. I didn't have a word for it, but it didn't feel good. I protested against the Vietnam War, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, against racism and segregation, marched for civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and women's rights. I was part of an Asian American movement, giving voice to our experience. After the '92 riots, I was commissioned to write a solo piece by the Taper in response. Writing is a journey of discovery. I discovered I was not a perfect ally. I discovered I was part of the problem. Even unconsciously, I had been indoctrinated so deeply, so unknowingly, that I didn't even know how deep these feelings were hidden. Simple, unwitting, unconscious, but searingly harmful. I was doing what many were doing to me. Unconscious disregard, judgment, assumptions based on race, social class, appearance. I worked hard to check myself. Then I became a mother and everything shifted. Now I simply say to myself, that's my child. Say it. George Floyd was my child. The others are our children. It changed how I saw the world. So please, check yourself. Lead with love and an open heart. Don't judge. Listen and learn and do better each day. And don't be a spectator, be a participant in change. The struggle is real.
As we've just heard, everyone has stories and thoughts to share. And regardless of our race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, no one is immune to the pain of tolerance. And we all have different ways of handling these challenges, including our next 3 guests.
To be perfectly honest, we're as a nation recognize our original sins, which is the genocide of the Native Americans and the slavery that went on. We're not going to make any progress. It's just going to be like this from now on. I'm reading a book right now from a Jewish author that talked about what the Germans did to get over their racism. And they acknowledged. And the difference is that for them, from the top down, from the prime minister or the chancellor, they all recognized what happened. And even as time went on, they even recognized even more and more what was happening. I don't see progress. I mean, I see the same thing that's been happening all my life, which is not uplifting, you know. It's not something, it's not a positive take on things. But the one thing that we forget, which is really sad, is that, like for instance, the riots in Tulsa, horrible. Nobody was held account for it, but we forget the fact that this was a community that was self-sufficient. They weren't looking at other people helping them. They were helping themselves. They had stores, they had banks, they, you know, like they said, it was the African-American Wall Street. And we forget that we have the financial and we have the voting power to do whatever we want to do. We get sidetracked with all these other things. And as long as we get sidetracked with them, there'll never be any progress. After George Floyd, they had a number of other police brutality cases after that. Even after they knew that they were going to be filmed and they knew that they still did it because they just don't look at us as human beings. What the establishment fears is two things. They fear our financial independence, and they fear our voting independence. Those are the two things that they fear more than anything else. Now, if you want to make a difference, those are the two things you got to do.
So how do you make crazy not crazy? I don't know. I think I've always wanted to get to the crux of human beings. I love people. I'm that type of person that, you know, I'll give you all the rope you want to hang yourself. That's when I decide, you know, okay, this is either a good person or it's a bad person. It doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter where you live, what class structure, what education you've had. Who are you, you know? And how do you relate to me? And I start there. And so the idea that that me walking into a room automatically either intimidates somebody or makes somebody fear me or makes somebody think that I'm stupid or that certainly I must be poor or not come from a good family. That's foreign concept to me. I was never raised that way, you know? So I don't really understand how to solve something that seems so simple. It really is as simple as, I mean, my family is Christian on both sides, very different Christian religions, Baptist and African Methodist Episcopal, very Black culturally, and, you know, as far as the United States is concerned. My family, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and so we're all kind of bathed in this culture. But the thing that I always got from almost every religion that I've ever been exposed to, you know, going to school with Jewish people or whatever, is to love your creator and then to love your neighbor as yourself. So if you have a deep love for your creator and a deep love for yourself, you wouldn't steal or you wouldn't, you know, hurt somebody or you wouldn't, you know, you just wouldn't mistreat someone because you don't want to be mistreated. So you are the example of what you hope to be, you know, have relationship with in the world. But when I was a child, I had a friend who was a Jehovah's Witness. And I remember, I think we had to have been about 8 years old. I knew her. And she lived not too far, maybe a couple of streets away. And I was having a birthday party. And I invited everybody in my classroom, but she couldn't come. And I didn't understand why she couldn't come because Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate birthdays. And I went to her mother's house. I went to their home and I knocked on the door, and I remember just asking her mother why. Why couldn't, my friend come to my party? And she sat me down and she put out all of the watchtowers, and she was trying to explain to me her religion. And I came home with all this material at 8 years old. My father looked at me and he said, "Are you thinking about becoming a Jehovah's Witness?" I said, no, I'm just trying to understand, because her family's different. And Dad said, "Well, what do you think God is?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "But I think, that we're all drops of water and God is the ocean." Now that you've heard my voice, I'd be interested in hearing yours. Please click the link below and share your experiences about racism and stereotyping.
It's interesting because I grew up in Los Angeles, didn't have any, I would say, overt instances of racism growing up. The people that I became really good friends with through college, usually, or not usually, but through college, the majority of my friends were white. I tell you, you think about all the films that I loved, the classic films and TV shows, and I realized there were so many people that were like me that didn't have the opportunity to express themselves artistically on those shows. And I mean, this is not anything new. I'm sure I'm not the first person to talk about this, definitely not. But I guess it just hit me. It just was so strong that I thought, wow, they liked me as a person, but they weren't comfortable with me as a Black person. I think that with the statues coming down, different changes being made in local governments, I think that there's a good-hearted outpouring of support. I think it's an in thing to be woke more than it's something that people are doing because they really, really believe it and they want to make sure that things shift and change. Not everybody, because there are a lot of people that are out there marching and really giving their all for the momentum of change and of recognition of what people of color have had to endure.
We've just experienced Freda's incredible talent as a songstress. Next, she'll share some thoughts on race and racism in this country, followed by screen and stage star Alan Rosenberg. Although from different walks of life, these two artists share a common thread of self-reflection and forgiveness.
Baby, everybody isn't the same. There's some people who are gonna love you and accept you for who you are, what color you are, what religion or background you have. And there's some people who are going to dislike you because that is the mode that they're in. This is how they were brought up or taught. Remember, there was a song, you've got to be from South Pacific, you've got to be carefully taught. So we as a people, being better educated, more worldly than we were, let's say, 50 years ago. When I was a child coming up, I would say to that kid, this is something that my grandfather and my grandmother once told me, and they said the same thing, that some people are going to like you because they can see into you, your heart, that you have a good heart. And the thing is that more people, I think millennials, are better educated today than they were years ago from the time I was a little girl. And now I think people are more willing to accept you, except for there's always that little bit of thing in the back of their mind where a parent might still harbor some kind of essence of racism that they have not even acknowledged. Some people have that, and I have to confess, I'm guilty. I think we all have a little bit of that, but we have to say, oh, God, forgive me, that's wrong to think like that. You can't judge a book by its cover. And I've learned that that lesson keeps repeating itself over and over again. I would tell a child, when somebody shows you who they are the first time, believe them. Quote, Maya Angelou.
I've been given 3 minutes to talk about race in America in the year 2020. It's truly been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I think it's because I'm confronted with my own shame, my own extreme anger, and my own abject fear. Shame because I have been around for the last 70 years of the past 400 years of abject failure to confront our legacy of white supremacy in this country, and I haven't done nearly enough. Extreme anger because I can't believe we have to keep relearning the same lessons over and over and over again with each act of violence. We have to pretend that we're shocked by the racism. We know full well it's been here all along. I'm extremely angry that we're still talking about Confederate flags and Confederate statues and the Washington Redskins and Chief Wahoo in the year 2020. And I live in abject fear because I know full well that the white supremacist in the very White House is marshaling his forces, stoking the fires, sending troops into inner cities, which means that this cancer that lives in our soul has metastasized and threatens to consume the very democracy that we all say we cherish. My life started out very optimistically. In 1950, the year I was born, my dad's first cousin, Bobby, married an African-American woman, Barbara Scott. He had met at Yale Law School 5 years previously. In 1950, interracial marriage was almost as rare as seeing an African-American woman graduate from Yale Law School. My beloved cousin, Barbara, was only the second person to achieve that. And I thought their union made our family so special. And I believed in my childhood optimism that our family's example of confronting our prejudices and embracing the many wonders and blessings of diversity could inspire the whole world. And their marriage also inspired my generation of my family to get involved in the civil rights movement. We were all inspired by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, of course. My older cousins got involved with SNCC and CORE. My late brother Mark got very involved with the Black Panther Party. I was by his side for a lot of that. We participated in these so-called radical organizations as they put pressure on the system and achieved what we considered to be real progress. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which we thought was sacrosanct and precious and permanent. When we achieved them, are bad. Inclusion was also achieved for minorities and women into the political system, which seemed like real progress. And that continued all the way up through the election of Barack Obama, the greatest president of my lifetime. What a glorious day that was. But I think that in those intervening years, we got so blinded by the progress we thought we had made and we thought we were making that we went back to living our own lives. We lost sight of the fact that this racism still existed in the soul of this country. It was unconfronted. I think we became blinded by those accomplishments. And now here we are. And what do we do about it? First, the obvious. We must get rid of this very white supremacist in the very White House. It's impossible to achieve real racial justice with white supremacists at the helm and those who enable him. If we can't do that, we will have to be prepared to get into the street and confront him and stay in the street for as long as it takes. We have to be prepared to sacrifice ourselves. But more importantly, we need to educate ourselves. We have to understand that supremacy comes from a fear of our own inferiority. We have to take a pledge to confront racism wherever and whenever we see it, in our systems, in our organizations, in our friends and our family, and most importantly, when we look in a mirror, we have to confront it in ourselves. And only then do we have a chance of achieving the kind of perfect union our forefathers talked about. Now that you've heard my voice, I really look forward to hearing your voice as we take a stand against racism. Resist, resist, resist.
We've come so far. We made so much progress. And I think this man, this president, is taking us back to another place. I think he's a racist. That statement was made by one of America's greatest civil rights champions, Congressman John Lewis, the late Congressman John Lewis. But it had to be said back then, and unfortunately, it still rings true today. Donald Trump is a racist and one of the most repugnant presidents this country has ever seen. But he's not alone in his hateful and destructive behavior. He is aided and abetted by those, elected or not, who have silently or not so silently supported his white nationalist beliefs. I'm an African American whose father was a police officer and mother was a school teacher. And years before I was born, my father purchased some land to build his dream home with my mother in Los Angeles. Well, there was a petition to prohibit my family from building that home. And fortunately, one white family refused to sign that petition, which allowed my mother and father to build that dream home. So now it's 2020. The world is spinning out of control once again. And what is our culpability in this mess? Because as long as we don't do our damnedest to break out of the cycle of intolerance, racism, and lack of empathy, nothing will really change. I realize this may be an uncomfortable conversation for some, but real sustainable change has to be uncomfortable. Challenge yourself to actually do something meaningful. For the immediate future, or for right now, try these steps. First step, forgive yourself. Second step, campaign. Campaign for change. Step 3, no longer allow hate and hate speech and intolerance to go unchallenged. Step 4, join us. Please log on to www.themankindproject.org and share your feelings. Share with all of us what's going on. We need you to join this righteous battle. Step 5, vote. Please vote. Step 6, please be safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing. This pandemic is real. It's not a hoax, no matter what that idiot says. It is real. So join us, join this righteous battle. We can make a change. We can create a world that we all deserve to have. All right, now that you've heard me go on and on. Now we want to hear from you. So just click on the link below and join us. Join this righteous battle against racism and intolerance, and let's build some empathy.
Hi, my name's Ed Harris. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in an all-white, middle-class, northern New Jersey suburb of New York City. My parents were liberal Democrats and devout Christians who did their best to live the maxim, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So the systemic racism in this country is not in my DNA, but it penetrated me nonetheless. They got to me, the powers that be. The white man powers that be succeeded in making me assume that somehow I was superior to Black people, to all people of color, that I had something on them. I was white. They weren't. This wasn't even a conscious thought. The idea of white supremacy is an indoctrination that has prevailed in this country for 400 years and continues daily in subtle and frighteningly not so subtle ways. It's a cultural brainwashing that can't be just wiped away. It's insidious and deep. The Black Lives Matter movement is demanding that I question just how deep this indoctrination has penetrated me. It is demanding that I take a very serious, honest inventory of my own personal thoughts and feelings about people of color. It's not an overnight job. It's an ongoing inventory. It requires vigilance. And it is an inventory that I think every white person in this country must make. Now that you've heard my voice, I'd like to hear your voice and hear what you have to say about racism and intolerance in this country and what can be done about it. Thank you.
Such powerful words. Thank you, Ed, and to all who shared intimate and honest thoughts and stories with us tonight. Well, we've come to the end of our first episode. Tune in next week when we're joined by iHeartRadio firebrand Mo Kelly, award-winning actress and activist Frances Fisher, television icon and prolific playwright Ted Lang, entrepreneur and supermodel Beverly Johnson, multi-Emmy winner Keith David, groundbreaking actress Rain Valdez, and so many other talented artists in our final episode of Tears, the event against racism and stereotyping. Before I leave you, we've asked you tonight to share your voice and stand with us against racism and intolerance. Now's the perfect time to do so. So please just click on the link below and share your voice in a selfie video to the Mankind Project Dream, the database of racial empathy advancing mankind. I'm Anne-MarieJohnson, and on behalf of the Mankind Project founder and president, Richard Steller, and our entire board, thank you for watching. We'll be back Friday, September 4th, with another thought-provoking episode. In the meantime, wear a mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing, and stay safe. Good night.